Welcome to the Total Connector Show. My name is Keyvan Davani. I've got a very special guest live here at the Lightning Conference in Berlin 2019. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Miro, so you are the project leader and the CEO of Aeropass?
Correct.
Yeah. Would you just briefly introduce yourself, what's your path, just briefly, to Bitcoin, Lightning Network, and your background, and then maybe briefly describe what is the intention, the vision, and the purpose of your project? Thanks so much.
I was born in Russia, educated as a nuclear physicist. Moved to the United States a few dozen years ago. Spent most of my life in Silicon Valley. Did several startups. The most recent one was in the fintech space, in payments and in SmartChip cards and payment terminals. We were building, and we have a proprietary merchant network in San Francisco and in Mexico and a few cities around the world. And while I was doing it, Bitcoin was sucking me in philosophically, ideologically. It all started with me listening to Andreas Antonopoulos' podcast, and I totally bought the whole agenda, not from the very first time, but within probably a couple hours. And I started researching Bitcoin on my own, started trading, buying, and it was pretty early on. And at some point, I realized that I have a point of convergence between my business, which is a merchant network with smart cards and terminals, and Bitcoin. So we've recently built a product which from the outside looks like an user interface that consists of a plastic card like this and a payment terminal. This is a very portable payment terminal.
Could you explain this briefly? Like, how does it work? Like, what's the function, features?
What it does, it completely mimics the experience of the regular Visa MasterCard payment anywhere at a merchant, like at a coffee shop. So if you want to buy something, the seller, the merchant would punch in whatever they want to sell at the terminal, and then a buyer would basically tap the card on the terminal.
And it's instantaneous.
It's instantaneous.
Yes.
It basically initiates the Lightning Network transaction, and
so the speeds problem is solved with this.
the speeds problem. It's not our solution.
Right.
It runs completely on top of the Lightning Network, Bitcoin Lightning Network. So since my romance with Bitcoin have started with the philosophy, I tried to keep the architecture, and I think we've succeeded, being completely decentralized, which means that anyone can buy a card, a blank card on Amazon or on eBay or on Alibaba, and then download code from GitHub and compile this code and burn it into the card with with certain security artifacts that are produced from their Lightning channel, and then they can use this card, and this card is going to work.
Exactly. Yeah.
So right now the project is not in production; it's in prototype.
But has it been tested, like by real, like potential merchants, and what's the feedback? What's the user experience?
The users love it, and the whole idea. So for me, the goal is to contribute to the adoption play. So, and to create a product that is usable by my mother. And my mom doesn't understand. She has hard time figuring out what the phone application is. But she learned how to use plastic cards. So if I give her this plastic card, she would be able to go to the grocery store and buy herself some vegetarian
and that's the crux of this whole adoption problem. Is how do we make it as feasible, as intuitive, and user-friendly as possible? Then problem solved. But I guess that's why we're here at this Lightning conference, because there's so many problems with with the scalability, speed, Isn't that the problems we're working on collectively?
And so scalability and speed is something that I believe we have lots of bright minds that are working on, and I'm listening and I'm admired with the different solutions that they come up with, and they'll get there. So what I am attacking is the usability.
Right.
So recreating the whole experience that everybody is used to. If it's not a plastic card, it could be a wallet on your phone, which was introduced, like for example, for Apple with Apple Pay, right? Something that that everyone is used to, that you don't have to explain that you need to install an application. Here is the QR code. Here's the note that you need to, etc., etc. Also, it's important to mention that people can run the nodes in the system, their own nodes. It's not a custodial system. It's really a framework and a protocol on top of Lightning Network on how to build your own merchant system. So you can basically download the code for the terminal, compile it for the device that you have, and it's gonna work. Also, if all works well, I think we have solved the chargebacks functionality. So it would bring the chargeback functionality into the Lightning Network.
Could you explain that for layman?
So when you pay for something, with a credit card, please come back and say and protest the charge. There is a time period when you can do it. In our protocol, it becomes possible.
Wow.
You can set up like 48 hours when you can protest the charge, and you can like substantiate to the consensus why are you protesting this charge, and if consensus decided that you as a cardholder, as a payee, you are correct, they would return the money, and they wouldn't give it to the merchant. So this is something that actually we're pretty proud of, that we hopefully we've figured it out. This is like an alpha.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Oh, and I keep mentioning that it's an open source project. It's coming out to the open source. We're cleaning out the code. The whole project is about 3 months old, so it's very new, and it's going to be coming out to the open source. And
that's great. Like a lot of other projects, not a lot, but some other like Hodl, I think they're just open source there, or BTCP. So I mean, these are all. I think this is really contributes to the network effect also, and to the freedom.
And I mean, we are a company. We're a small startup, so we have like 10 developers, and with our 10 developers, what we can do, it cannot compare by an order of 5 magnitudes to what the open source community can do if they believe in what we do, and we do believe, because this is adoption. This is how I make my Bitcoin more expensive, and this is how we replace the fiat with Bitcoin. That's the whole goal.
Great. You want to talk about a little bit about the roadmap of your project? Like, what's your vision? Like, what are the next steps?
So there are 2 layers to the project. One layer is a completely open source layer, which is going to come out to public within. I don't want to predict. It's like anywhere in between, like a couple weeks to a few months. You know how with development, you never know really. And so there's going to be a few cycles of development, and there is also an outer layer, which is a layer where people like companies, or maybe in some localities it would be enthusiasts, who would be creating services on top of this layer that would, for example, coming back to my mom's situation, she wouldn't be running the node. So
you would be running it for her.
Not us. No. We're providing basically infrastructure for someone who can run, or who would want to run a custodial node, or whichever way the guys from like the Lightning protocol would solve it, because there are a few ways to to do it, as I heard. So there is another process that needs to be running next to the node to talk to our protocol, or maybe we'll incorporate it into the main protocol that would allow somebody who would serve as an intermediary between the network and the engineering
Yeah.
and people like my mom. And they would basically create these cards and give it to the people who wouldn't
Great.
want to deal
Yeah.
with the peculiarities of the technology. So at least this is what I have in my mind right now. We'll see how it plays out. Maybe it's going to be somehow completely different. And at the same time, people who are tech savvy, who know how it works, and who are like privacy oriented, they would be able to use the same network of merchants and buy coffee or buy clothing or wherever the terminals are, with the cards that they would build themselves that are running on top of their nodes. This would be also possible.
Okay. I don't know whether you mentioned that or not, but what I'm curious about, would that be possible, like the next stage after the card, would it be possible to have like a, something like a QR code or something like that on your mobile phone, since we are all running on a mobile smartphone? And then
QR code already exists, so we are not going in the direction of QR codes.
yeah. But I mean, as an
But what would
option,
be,
as an alternative
what
option.
would be possible is that the smart card itself, it has the same technology as your smartphone with a secure element. So when you're using Apple Pay or Android Pay, you're actually accessing the secure element and mimicking the functionality of the card. So we're supporting the standard. So once the project is in production, you would be able to install the card in your phone and use it in a in exactly the same way that you're using Samsung Pay, Google Pay, or
Yeah.
Apple Pay. So yeah, that
Great.
I hope this answers the
Yeah,
question.
definitely.
So
Yeah.
plastic card is not the only option. It could be a smartwatch. It could be a smartphone. We're following the standard that has
Yeah.
already been developed by the industry 10 years ago.
Great, great. So, would you want to let my listeners, viewers know where they can find more information about you? Again, the project is called AeroPass. What's the website?
So Aeropass.com. Aeropass is the original company with the traditional merchant network, and we will be launching the Bitcoin option with the merchants that we already have in San Francisco. So Aeropass.com.
That's
But
AERO.
arrow like bows and arrows, and then pass as safe passage.
Okay.
One word. We will create a different name for it. So the protocol itself, we're calling it RSVP, Routed Settlement Validation Protocol, and I think it's an interesting wordplay that the terminals and the cards are doing the RSVP talk between each other, and in a way with the chargebacks, basically what they're doing, they're committing the payment, which stays with the consensus, and then so it's really a responsive replay.
Great. Yeah.
Kind of thing. So it's a meaningful wordplay. So the protocol, we're calling it RSVP protocol, but there will be a different branding or thing.
Do you have a video, like a YouTube channel, social media, Twitter, Facebook, or?
It's all either linked or will be linked from aeropass.com. So
All right.
Facebook, Twitter, yes. YouTube channel, we haven't supported it for a few years, but as this develops, you'll see more and more content. And, eventually, it would switch from AeroPass name to something else.
Yeah, that's awesome news and content and contribution you're doing to this space. Are there any like other target groups, like besides merchants, that you are targeting, like for our listeners and viewers who want to are there other multiplicators in this space that you're sort of directing
So you're talking about potential
Yeah,
customers.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
customers is not a good word for it because we're really pushing it out as an open source project.
Beautiful, yeah.
With and we are the community of users. That would be probably the better way to call them.
Great.
So with merchants, the way we are shaping our offering to the merchants is again recreate as much of their experience that they're used to for years as possible. So the terminals, if a merchant wants to receive Bitcoin in their pocket, it's the easiest way. But then they can integrate it with an exchange and receive USD and the instant payouts. There are some businesses in United States where they can do the instant conversion. So we're working with interfaces into them so that merchants don't have to understand Bitcoin and deal with volatility if they don't want to.
I see.
As for the card users, so it's the cryptocurrency community, the existing community, and we do have some plans on reaching out to the broader audience, at least in California and worldwide as well. As I mentioned before, that there is an entity in the whole system that I call consensus, which is basically a consensus of transaction validators. So these are people that are running nodes, that are Lightning nodes, but not only Lightning nodes, there is also another piece of software that we'll be putting out that would be validating the card transactions and actually confirming or rejecting the chargeback request, etc. So that's another community that is yet to be built. So it's another challenge that we need to solve. But just knowing how the Bitcoin community is, I don't think this would be the biggest challenge. People would pick it up.
Right. Wonderful. Well, any final thoughts you want to share before we close?
Oh, yeah.
Like anything of importance people should look into if they want to, educate themselves or get in touch with you?
Maybe my final. So I'm here to meet people and get exposed to the spirit of the developers community of Lightning Network development. I knew a few people from the past who participate in the whole effort of bringing fast transactions to Bitcoin. But right now I pretty much see them all. And it's very important for us to get support of these people because, hey, it's an open source project. So I want people, the developers, to participate and to take it apart, give us critique, break it down,
Exactly.
assemble it back together, and let's do it together.
Teamwork, yeah.
We
Wonderful.
all want it.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I appreciate your time and your sharing your knowledge and your insight. And yeah, thank you so much for your contribution to this really evolutionary, what do you want to call it? Like monetary, economical transformation of our society. It takes time, but trial and error, right?
Yep.
So.
And thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, Miro, thanks so much. Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.